In a small village called Irele, located deep within the heart of Nigeria, lived a beautiful young girl named Adesuwa. She was known for her kindness and her unyielding determination. Adesuwa grew up under the strict guidance of her father, Chief Okoro, a well-respected man in the village, and her mother, Mama Nkechi. At the age of 14, Adesuwa met Efe, a charming boy from a neighboring village. Efe, though older, had a gentle way about him that drew her in, and soon they began a secret relationship. Despite her parents' warnings, Adesuwa couldn't resist sneaking away to see Ife. Her father, a man of stern principles, quickly became suspicious. After discovering the relationship, he forbade Adesuwa from ever seeing Ife again. Her mother, though kinder, echoed her father's sentiments, but Adesuwa's heart was young, and she felt invincible in her love. She continued to meet Ife in secret, ignoring the dangers that lurked around her. Little did she know, fate was about to change her life forever. Months passed, and the thrill of their hidden love consumed Adesuwa. But one morning she began to feel weak and dizzy. Her mother noticed the changes in her daughter and feared the worst. It wasn't long before Adesuwa discovered she was pregnant. Fear gripped her heart. She had always heard stories of girls being thrown out of their homes for such things. She couldn't bear the thought of telling her parents. When her father eventually found out, his anger knew no bounds. "You've brought shame to this family," Chief Okoro bellowed, his voice shaking the walls of their mud house. He wasted no time and chased Adesuwa out of the house. Mama Nkechi, heartbroken but helpless, watched her daughter leave with tears in her eyes. "Go and never return," Chief Okoro shouted, as the village watched Adesuwa leave in disgrace, with only a few belongings in her hands. Adesuwa wandered through the village, her heart heavy with sorrow. She had nowhere to go, no one to turn to. The sun blazed overhead, but the coldness in her heart made her feel numb. She clutched her stomach, feeling the life growing within her, and whispered, "I will protect you, no matter what." As night fell, Adesuwa found herself on the edge of a thick forest. It was the same forest that the elders had warned her about, a place said to be inhabited by spirits. With no other choice, she entered, hoping to find shelter. She prayed to the gods for protection, her feet sinking into the soft earth as she made her way deeper into the woods. Unbeknownst to her, she was not alone in the forest that night. Just as the moonlight dimly lit her path, Adesuwa heard a rustle in the bushes. Startled, she froze in her tracks. Out of the shadows emerged a tall, elderly woman with a gentle face and piercing eyes. "What are you doing here, child?" the woman asked, her voice soft but filled with authority. Adesuwa hesitated, unsure whether to trust the stranger. "I have nowhere else to go," Adesuwa whispered, her voice trembling. The woman studied her for a moment before nodding. "Follow me," she said. Without another word, Adesuwa followed the woman through the forest until they reached a small hut hidden among the trees. "You can rest here tonight, but beware, child. The forest listens to your every thought. Tread carefully," the woman warned before disappearing into the darkness. That night, Adesuwa had a dream. In it, she stood at the edge of a cliff, looking down at a river that flowed with blood. A voice called out to her, warning her to be strong and to fight for her child's future. She awoke with a start, her heart pounding. The old woman was nowhere to be seen, but her warning echoed in Adesuwa's mind. Determined to survive for the sake of her unborn child, Adesuwa decided she would not return to Irele. She would find Efe, and together they would build a life far away from the judgment of their village. But first, she needed to gather her strength and figure out where Efe had gone. The road ahead was uncertain, and Adesuwa knew that only the brave could survive the challenges that awaited her. The next morning, Adesuwa woke up to the sound of birds chirping in the forest. The old woman had left some food by the fire, but she was nowhere to be found. After eating, Adesuwa gathered her strength and began her journey to find Efe. She remembered he had mentioned his parents lived in a far-off village called Ukom. She wasn't sure how far it was, but she knew she had no choice but to start walking. As she made her way out of the forest and into the open fields, Adesuwa felt the weight of the world on her shoulders. With each step, she replayed her father's words in her mind, and she wondered if she had made the biggest mistake of her life. But as she looked down at her growing belly, she knew there was no turning back. "For you, my child, I will find a way," she whispered, her determination growing stronger with every mile. After days of walking and resting beneath the shelter of trees, Adesuwa finally arrived at Ukom. Her feet were sore and her clothes were dusty from the long journey. The village was bustling with life as children played near the stream and traders called out to passers-by, selling their goods. But Adesuwa had no time to admire the village. She was on a mission. She asked around for Ife's family, and after several inquiries, a kind old man pointed her toward a small compound on the edge of the village. With a heavy heart, Adesuwa approached the house, her mind filled with hope and fear. She knocked on the wooden door, and after a moment, an elderly woman opened it. "Good day, Ma," Adesuwa greeted, her voice trembling. "I am looking for Efe. Is this his home?" The woman's expression darkened, and without a word, she stepped aside to let Adesuwa in. Adesuwa stepped into the dimly lit room, her heart pounding as the elderly woman stared at her. "You must be the girl who caused all this trouble," the woman finally said, her voice sharp. Adesuwa felt a lump in her throat. "Please, I'm just here to see Efe. I have no other place to go," she explained, trying to stay calm. The old woman sighed deeply. "Efe is no longer here. He left for the city to seek a better life," she said, "and he didn't leave any message for you. We had hoped he would forget about this whole mess, but it seems you followed him here." Adesuwa felt her heart sink. "Please, Ma, I just need to see him. I am carrying his child," she pleaded. The woman's face hardened. "If you're truly carrying his child, then that is your problem, not ours. My son has bigger dreams now." "Leave this place," the woman said coldly before turning away. Adesuwa was left standing in the doorway, her heart shattered. Eve had abandoned her. The one person she had risked everything for was gone, leaving her to face the consequences alone. With nowhere else to go, she sat down outside the house, feeling defeated. Her mind raced with thoughts of what to do next, but nothing made sense. She felt utterly alone in the world. As the sun began to set, a young girl from the village approached her. "Why are you sitting here all by yourself?" the girl asked curiously. Adesuwa wiped away her tears and managed a weak smile. "I'm just lost," she whispered. The girl, seeing her sadness, extended a hand. "My name is Ngozi. You can come with me. We have room at our house," she offered. Grateful for the kindness, Adesuwa stood up and followed Ngozi, wondering if she would ever find peace again. Ngozi led Adesuwa to her family's home, a modest but welcoming hut on the other side of the village. Inside, Ngozi's parents greeted Adesuwa warmly and offered her food and a place to rest. They didn't ask questions about where she had come from or why she was alone. Instead, they treated her with kindness and respect, something she hadn't felt in a long time. That night, as she lay on a simple mat, Adesuwa thought about the road ahead. She realized that she could no longer rely on Ife or anyone else to save her. She had to take control of her own destiny. I will raise my child with or without him, she resolved, her heart filled with a new sense of purpose. The journey had been long and hard, but Adesuwa knew she was stronger than she had ever imagined. Weeks passed, and Adesuwa began to settle into life in Ukom. She helped Ngozi's family with daily chores and soon became a part of their household. One day, while walking through the village, Adesuwa overheard a conversation about a powerful healer who lived in the hills beyond Ukom. The villagers said she had the power to see the future and heal the broken-hearted. Curious and desperate for guidance, Adesuwa decided to visit the healer. Early the next morning, she made her way to the hills, the path steep and winding. When she finally arrived, she found an elderly woman sitting outside a small hut, her eyes closed in meditation. "I've come seeking wisdom," Adesuwa said softly, her voice filled with hope. The woman opened her eyes slowly, as if she had been expecting her. The healer, known as Mama Ebele, motioned for Adesuwa to sit beside her. "You have traveled far, child," Mama Ebele said, her voice gentle yet powerful, "and you carry a heavy burden." Adesuwa nodded, her eyes filling with tears. "I don't know what to do. The father of my child has left me, and I have no one," she confessed. Mama Ebele placed a hand on Adesuwa's belly and closed her eyes. After a moment, she spoke again. "This child you carry is a blessing, not a curse. You must not let the pain of the past cloud your future. You have the strength within you to overcome this." Adesuwa listened carefully, feeling a sense of peace wash over her. "But what about Ife? Should I wait for him to return?" she asked. Mama Ebele shook her head. "You must let him go. His path is no longer tied to yours. Focus on building a future for yourself and your child." Adesuwa returned to the village with a renewed sense of purpose. She realized that waiting for Ife would only hold her back. With the healer's words in her heart, she decided to focus on her future. She continued to live with Ngozi's family, who treated her as one of their own and helped them with their farm work. As the months passed, Adesuwa's belly grew, and so did her determination. She started making small crafts to sell at the village market, earning a little money for herself. Each day brought new challenges, but Adesuwa faced them with courage. Her spirit, once broken by betrayal, began to heal as she created a life for her and her unborn child. One fateful evening, as Adesuwa was returning from the market, she heard someone call her name. She turned around and saw Ife standing there looking older and more tired than she remembered. Her heart raced, unsure of what to feel. Ife approached her, a mixture of guilt and sadness in his eyes. "Adesuwa, I came back for you, oh," he said quietly. Adesuwa stood there, her emotions swirling. She had dreamt of this moment for so long, but now that it was happening, she didn't know what to say. Eve reached for her hand, but she pulled away. "Why now? After all this time?" she asked, her voice trembling. Eve looked down, ashamed. "I was wrong to leave. I realize that now. Please forgive me," he pleaded. But Adesuwa wasn't sure if she could. As Ife spoke, Adesuwa felt torn between the love she once had for him and the pain he had caused. She had spent months building a life without him, and now he was asking to come back into her world as if nothing had happened. "I don't know if I can forgive you," she said, her voice steady. "You left me when I needed you most. What makes you think things will be different now?" Eve's eyes filled with regret. "I know I hurt you, Adesuwa. I was scared and selfish. But I'm here now, and I want to make things right," he said. Adesuwa stood silent for a moment, then looked down at her swollen belly. "I have a child to think about now. I can't just let you walk back into my life," she replied, her heart heavy with the weight of her decision. Adesuwa couldn't sleep that night. Eve's sudden return had stirred emotions she thought she had buried. She lay awake, her mind replaying his words. Could she trust him again? Could she allow him back into her life after everything that had happened? She wasn't the same girl who had fallen in love with him all those months ago. She was a mother now, and her child's future was her priority. The next morning, Adesuwa went to visit Mama Ebele, hoping the healer would provide clarity. When she arrived, the old woman greeted her with a knowing smile. "You have a choice to make, child," Mama Ebele said. "But remember, your strength is no longer just for you. It is for the life growing inside you." Adesuwa nodded, understanding the wisdom in her words. She had the power to shape her own destiny, and this time she wouldn't be swayed by love alone. Days passed, and Ife continued to visit Adesuwa, pleading for a second chance. He promised to take care of her and their child, to be the man she deserved. But Adesuwa remained guarded. She had built a life without him, and she wasn't sure if she wanted him to be part of her future. One evening, as they walked through the village, Efe stopped and looked at her. "Adesuwa, I know I hurt you deeply, but I want to make things right. Will you marry me?" he asked, his voice sincere. Adesuwa was taken aback by his proposal. It was something she had dreamed of once, but now it felt different. She stared at him, her heart heavy with doubt. "I need time to think," she replied. Eve nodded, understanding her hesitation. He knew he couldn't rush her decision, but he was determined to prove that he had changed. That night, Adesuwa sat with Ngozi by the fire, her mind troubled by Ife's proposal. Ngozi, sensing her friend's distress, asked, "What's bothering you, Adesuwa?" Adesuwa sighed, unsure of how to express the turmoil inside her. "Ife wants me to marry him," she said quietly. Ngozi looked at her, surprised. "Isn't that what you wanted all along?" Adesuwa shook her head. "I thought I did, but now I'm not so sure. So much has changed." "I've changed," she admitted. Ngozi smiled softly. "It's okay to be unsure, but ask yourself this: can you trust him to stand by you when things get difficult? Can he be the father your child needs?" Adesuwa pondered Ngozi's words, realizing that trust was the foundation of everything. If she couldn't trust Ife, how could she build a future with him? The next morning, Adesuwa returned to Mama Ebele, seeking one last piece of advice. "I don't know what to do," Adesuwa confessed, her voice trembling. "Ife wants me to marry him, but I don't know if I can trust him again." Mama Ebele listened patiently, her wise eyes studying Adesuwa. After a long pause, Mama Ebele spoke. "The path of love is never easy, my child, but trust cannot be forced. It must be earned. Ife may have returned, but only you can decide if his presence is what you need. The gods have given you strength for a reason. Trust in your own heart to guide you." Adesuwa nodded, feeling a sense of calm wash over her. For the first time, she realized that the decision was hers alone. She didn't need to rely on Ife or anyone else to shape her future. As time went on, Adesuwa observed Ife closely. He tried hard to win her back, but his actions sometimes felt half-hearted. One evening, as they walked through the market, Ife got distracted by an old friend and left Adesuwa standing alone for nearly an hour. She watched from a distance as he laughed and joked, seemingly forgetting about her. When he finally returned, Adesuwa confronted him. "If you can forget me so easily now, what will happen when things get tough?" she asked, her voice filled with frustration. Eve stammered, realizing his mistake, but Adesuwa had already made up her mind. "I don't need someone who only remembers me when it's convenient," she said, walking away. Eve called after her, but she didn't look back. After that day, Adesuwa felt a new sense of freedom. She realized that her happiness didn't depend on Ife's love or approval. She had been strong enough to survive being cast out by her family, and she would be strong enough to raise her child on her own if necessary. She continued working at the market, saving money for her baby's future. Her resilience did not go unnoticed by the villagers. People began to admire Adesuwa for her strength and determination. Even Ngozi's parents, who had taken her in, were impressed by how much she had grown. "You've become like a daughter to us," Ngozi's mother said one evening. "We are proud of the woman you've become." The months passed quickly, and soon the time came for Adesuwa to give birth. The labor was long and difficult, but with Ngozi and her mother by her side, Adesuwa found the strength to push through. After hours of struggle, Adesuwa gave birth to a healthy baby boy. She held him close, tears of joy streaming down her face. "I will protect you always, my son," she whispered, feeling a deep bond form between them. The villagers gathered to celebrate the birth of Adesuwa's child. They showered her with gifts and blessings, and for the first time in a long while, Adesuwa felt a sense of belonging. She had built a new family and a new life, one that was filled with hope and promise. A week after the birth of her son, Ife returned once again. This time he seemed more sincere, more desperate. "Adesuwa, I know I've hurt you, but I want to be a part of our child's life," he said, his voice full of emotion. He knelt before her, his eyes pleading for forgiveness. "Please give me one more chance." Adesuwa looked down at her sleeping son, her heart torn. She knew Ife was trying, but she also knew that trust couldn't be rebuilt overnight. "I don't know if I can ever trust you fully again," she said softly, "but our son deserves to know his father. You can be a part of his life, but we will take this one step at a time." With that decision, Efe began to visit Adesuwa and their son regularly. He worked hard to prove that he had changed, showing up to help with chores and spending time with the baby. Adesuwa appreciated his efforts, but she remained cautious. She had learned the hard way that love wasn't always enough to sustain a relationship. As weeks turned into months, Adesuwa saw glimpses of the man she had once fallen in love with. Efe seemed to have matured, and although their relationship wasn't what it used to be, they slowly rebuilt a sense of partnership. "Maybe there's hope for us yet," Adesuwa thought, though she knew the future was still uncertain. One day, the village held its annual Festival of Hope, a celebration of new beginnings. Adesuwa, holding her son in her arms, stood among the villagers as they danced and sang. Efe stood beside her, watching the festivities with a smile. For the first time in a long while, Adesuwa felt a sense of peace. The festival reminded her of how far she had come and how much she had grown. As the sun set and the villagers gathered around the fire, Efe turned to Adesuwa. I know it will take time, but I hope we can rebuild our family for the sake of our son, he said softly. Adesuwa nodded, feeling a glimmer of hope in her heart. She didn't know what the future held, but she was willing to give it a chance, one step at a time. As Adesuwa and Efe worked to rebuild their relationship, another challenge emerged. One day, Efe's old friends from the city came to visit the village. They invited him to join them on a business venture that required him to leave for several months. Eve was torn between his desire to make a better life for his family and his commitment to Adesuwa and their son. When he told Adesuwa about the opportunity, she remained calm. You have to decide what's most important to you, Efe. But remember, trust is built through actions, not promises, she said. Eve spent the next few days wrestling with the decision. He wanted to provide for his family, but he also knew that leaving now could undo all the progress they had made. After much thought, Ife made his decision. He approached Adesuwa with a determined look in his eyes. I've decided to stay. I can't leave you and our son right now, he said firmly. Adesuwa was surprised but relieved. I'm glad you've chosen to stay, she replied. It was a small step, but it showed her that Ife was committed to their family. With his decision to stay, Ife began to take on more responsibilities at the village farm, helping to provide for their child. His actions spoke louder than any words he could have said, and slowly, Adesuwa began to trust him again. Though their journey was far from over, they were building a stronger foundation for their family. Months passed, and life in the village continued peacefully. Adesuwa's son, whom she named Ifeanyi, grew strong and healthy, bringing joy to everyone who knew him. Efe worked hard to support his family, and though the challenges of the past still lingered, Adesuwa found herself beginning to forgive him. One day, as they sat together by the river, Eve turned to Adesuwa. I know I've made many mistakes, but I promise I will do everything I can to be the man you and Ifeanyi deserve, he said quietly. Adesuwa smiled, feeling a sense of peace. We've come a long way, Ife. Let's continue building this future together, she replied. It wasn't a perfect ending, but it was the beginning of something new, a family built on love, trust, and hope. As the years passed, Adesuwa and Ife became respected members of the village. They worked together to raise Ifeanyi, teaching him the values of hard work and honesty. The villagers who had once pitied Adesuwa now admired her for her resilience and strength. Even Mama Ebele, the wise healer, would often visit to offer blessings to their family. Adesuwa never forgot the lessons she had learned during her time of struggle. She understood that life was full of trials, but it was how one faced them that mattered most. With Ife by her side and Ifeanyi growing strong, Adesuwa felt a sense of fulfillment she had never known before. Years later, as Adesuwa watched her son play in the fields, she reflected on her journey. From the moment she was cast out of her family's home to the day she gave birth, she had faced countless challenges. But through it all, she had remained strong, determined to build a better life for herself and her child. Eve, who had once been lost, had found his way back to her, and together they had built a family based on trust, love, and forgiveness. Adesuwa knew that life would continue to test them, but she also knew that they would face whatever came their way. hand in hand. As the sun set over the village, Adesuwa smiled, knowing that her story was one of resilience, love, and hope, a story that would be passed down through generations to come. Thank you for tuning in to Tales Motherland again. We sincerely appreciate your viewership and likes and comments. Please be sure to hit the subscribe and like button and stay connected to us for new intriguing African stories and folktale. Once again, thanks for watching.